Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan are among those now free from Russian custody. That's after a large-scale prisoner swap taking place earlier today. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us now live from the White House. Good evening, Jack. So this has been a long time coming. What is the latest?
Yeah, it's definitely been a long time coming. This being the largest prisoner swap since the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia. Now we're seeing at the White House behind me here, they're flying the wrongful detainee flag right below the American flag. And keep in mind, this is the first time that's being done in celebration. Now, among those that were released were 26 prisoners from 7 different countries. It includes 3 U.S. citizens and 1 green card holder, including Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. Now, they're in the care of the U.S. and safe. And earlier at the White House here, President Biden saying that this is a great relief to have them back. He was speaking with the families of the freed prisoners. Take a look.
The deal that made this possible was a feat of diplomacy and friendship. Multiple countries helped get this done. They joined the difficult, complex negotiations at my request. So for anyone who questions whether allies matter, they do. They matter. And today is a powerful example of why it's vital to have friends in this world.
Now, it appears that the prisoner swap won't have much of an impact on the Russia-Ukraine war. When asked if President Biden would speak to Putin after this, Biden said that he doesn't have to. Now, as far as Whelan, he was in prison for nearly 6 years on espionage charges. Gershkovich sentenced for 16 years, serving, being held for 1 year so far. The State Department says that all of the U.S. prisoners that are now freed were wrongfully detained. Watch.
This is an issue that is so important and personal to Secretary Blinken. In the first weeks in this department, when he was sworn in as Secretary of State, he met with the families of all Americans wrongfully detained at that time in a video call, and continues to meet with families and returnees on a regular basis.
Now, among all the prisoners that were released, we saw that there were 5 Germans on the U.S. ally side, as well as 7 political prisoners in Russia that were released. And in exchange, Western nations released 8 to the Russian side, several spies and cyber criminals, and the worst of which they're saying is Vadim Krazikov, who was convicted of murder in Germany, allegedly ordered by Russian officials. Steve?
Certainly a lot of moving pieces here, Jack. We obviously saw the president speaking from the White House on this earlier. What else can we expect coming out of the White House in the coming hours and days?
Well, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are going to be meeting with the freed prisoners in the White. Actually, they'll be in Maryland at the joint military base there, meeting with them and at 11:30 p.m. So we saw earlier today, Harris was in Houston at former Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's eulogy, where she said this about the incident. She said that that Gershkovich and Whelan and the other prisoners have shown, quote, incredible courage. And Harris called their detention an appalling perversion of justice, and adding that we never stopped fighting for their release. Steve?
NTD's Jack Bradley, live from the White House. Thank you, Jack. And here to break down the release of the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich is New York-based trial attorney Nicole Brenecki. Nicole, thank you so much for joining.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Nicole, just 2 weeks ago, Evan Gershkovich was convicted on espionage charges by a Russian court. He's been kept behind bars for more than a year up until this point. What do you make of the timing of his release?
President Biden is talking about the success that he accomplished in releasing these prisoners. Obviously, an argument can be made that the timeline of that is towards the end of his presidency. That is part of building up the momentum for the other candidate that's running right now, as she also claims she was part of these negotiations. Definitely, we can applaud the choreography that they accomplished with, multiple countries, multiple planes. involved in that release. However, a question has to be asked if people who are detained in Russia on bogus charges, Russia, who is one of our biggest enemies in the geopolitical scene, people who are detained for bogus charges are being swapped for people who are accused of murder and much more serious acts. So that remains to be discussed. However, we also should be happy that these people were released because they were, as I said, kept there for no reason. And that is anguish forever. And it's a great success that they're out, and I'm happy for them and their families. To
your point, it is a moment of celebration, but we do have to take a step back and analyze any unintended consequences that may come from this event. I do want to play a clip from President Biden earlier today at the White House and get your reaction. Let's play that.
Today was a very good day, and we're going to build on it, drawing inspiration and continued courage from it for all of those who are held hostage or wrongfully detained around the world.
My apologies. That was National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan speaking there, reflecting on the efforts it took to secure the release of Gershkovich and others. This was a month-long multinational effort. So, Nicole, tell us about the scale of this type of high-stakes negotiation and prisoner swap, and ultimately who may be involved.
As I mentioned earlier, multiple countries were involved in that, and the logistics of that, as I said, planes and borders involved in everything. So on a logistical level, it was definitely a very complex operation, and President Biden underscored the fact that we have allies around the world who made that happen and made it possible. So yes, it was a complex operation, but there was a level of theatrics to it because, as I said, the issue that I brought up before, we just need to, everyone's life is very valuable, but we need to see the balance between who was released for whom.
And as you previously touched upon, there is talk about Russia potentially using this, specifically Gershkovich, as a bargaining chip to get their political prisoners back home. How do you see that as part of the Kremlin's strategy?
It's definitely a strategy. I think that people are more and more often being used as pawns in these geopolitical conflicts. And as we know, as I mentioned earlier, we have people who are arrested on bogus charges the moment they enter Russia. So Americans have to be very, very, they just have to watch out and make sure that they don't become the next Brittany Griner or the gentleman who was part of the military that got arrested, who went there just to see a friend's wedding. So Russia is really, really using that to its advantage. They're arresting people and then they're trying to use that in their negotiations. And this time it really worked out very well for Putin. And once again, it's important that these people are out. It's important that they're back in America with their families. But the politicians will have to make a decision for how long we're going to tolerate that and for how long we're going to cooperate with them, as it's becoming a more and more clear strategy on their part.
Nicole Brunecki, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Family, friends, and fellow politicians gathering at that Houston church today to honor the legacy of longtime Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who recently died of cancer. Vice President Kamala Harris was there to deliver the eulogy. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more from Houston.
Here at a North Houston church, high-profile dignitaries gathered to honor the life and legacy of late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who died recently after announcing just a month ago that she had pancreatic cancer. Vice President Kamala Harris delivering the eulogy calls her one of the smartest and toughest in Congress.
Sheila Jackson Lee worked with all her heart. She was also one of the most unrelenting. As those of us who were her colleagues can attest.
While Harris did not explicitly refer to her own campaign, she used the opportunity to make a call.
Let us continue to fight to realize the promise of America, a promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice.
Former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries were all here on Thursday.
What a legacy! May she forever rest in peace.
And President Biden was also in Houston earlier this week to pay respects. The late Congresswoman served her district for over 30 years. During her career, she earned a reputation for advocating for human rights and social issues. We talked to some members of the community about what the late Congresswoman meant to locals.
She's been a strong supporter not only of her community, of the people, but also of women. Any event that we had, she was there to support.
She's my good friend for over 40 years. During Hurricane Harvey, when Houston was underwater, she made sure everyone was taking place. She was out there in the trucks, in the boats, she was everywhere.
Meanwhile, in campaign news, the Democratic National Committee on Thursday started a days-long process to virtually nominate Harris for president. That means she will become the nominee weeks before the Democratic National Convention. And Harris's campaign announced that next week she will be campaigning with her to-be-announced running mate across battleground states. Reporting from Houston, Texas, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.